you're an aspiring leader, an established executive, an at-home mom, or a young person wanting to grow and learn, Marsha Martin will share actionable strategies for greater happiness, success, motivation, creativity, productivity, love, health, contribution, and fulfillment. Welcome to Talk This Way with your host, Marsha Martin. Marsha will guide you through the basics and unravel the ABCs of communication, leadership, and success by taking the wax on, wax off approach to communication mastery, ensuring that the skills you acquire will make you unstoppable. So now, please welcome the host of Talk This Way, Marsha Martin.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. This is Marsha Martin. I'm your host of Talk This Way. And we're being live streamed every Tuesday at 5 o'clock Eastern Time by Bold Brave TV. Welcome to the show. So I wanted to take a little bit of time and kind of catch you up to date on what we've been doing and what we're going to do. I've been teaching over the last many weeks in all of these episodes. I think we're at almost episode 7 or 8 or 9 now. Different laws, principles, and strategies of effective communication so you can be a more effective human being. And the whole purpose of this show is that I take some of my experience and my knowledge. I've been in this work and training people for over 50 years. I've trained over 300,000 people around the globe in communication and relationships and how to put businesses together, how to be more effective, how to cause your dreams to come true. And so I want to put all of that work into these episodes so that you can watch each episode and learn a piece of the pie. And as we get more involved and I put more in, pretty soon the pie comes together and you start getting to know how to use the information and how to use it in real life. Last week, if you were here, and if you weren't, then go and watch the archives. I talked about how language is like your toolkit. If you consider life as a game, and that's a good way to look at life, because if you think of it as so serious and horrible or really important, sometimes you don't produce the results that you get when you're having fun. And if you're looking at it from the point of view that it's a game, it makes it more fun. And your moves, I say, are in language. Language is what creates reality. There's a lot of steps along the way from when you start thinking something or speaking something or writing something. And language brings it across the bridge into reality. So I always say that you're living today in what you spoke last year. And language isn't just simple. It's quite complicated and very profound. And last week we learned what the distinctions or the speech actions are, the different types of language. And each different type of language has a different job to do. Just like when you have a toolkit, and maybe you have a saw and a hammer in your toolkit, and you want to do something, you use the saw to do what a saw does, and you use the hammer to do what a hammer does. I mean, you could use them both to do for both jobs, but if you use the wrong one, it would be pretty messy. So you want to be effective. You want to be powerful. And there are different types of language that have different jobs, just like a saw and a hammer. And last year we went through all of the different types of language and what the purpose that they had and what they do and how you use them to produce a certain particular result in life. And this week, I want to focus on one of those types, and it's the type that creates action. So we learned last week that a request and an offer are the language distinctions that generate action. If you're not having something get done or people aren't doing things, then the tool that you use to cause action, generate action, is a request or an offer. A lot of people use assessments, but assessments, it's not their job, so it doesn't work as well. People will say, I wish we would have a meeting next week. Well, that's somebody's opinion, and it doesn't generate action. But if you said, I request that you put together a meeting next week at this time, then you would have a greater chance of having it happen, having action. So I want to focus on what I call the action cycle this week. And it's a conversation. We call it a conversation for action. And it has several different parts to it. And when you put all the parts in and you're familiar with them and you're aware of what works and what doesn't work and what should be in the conversation, you have more chance of having action in the world than if you didn't. So the action cycle is made up of elements, and there are certain elements in it. And I want to show you these elements because I know that you can stop this video and then you maybe take some notes and write down. These are the elements of the action cycle. There's a customer, a performer, a request or an offer, a promise, a declaration of completion, a declaration of satisfaction, and conditions of satisfaction. Those are the elements that make up the conversation for action or the action cycle. So if you want to stop the video and write those down on the notes so you have them, and then I'll be explaining about each one. So first of all, I want you to know that if you're in a situation and you say to yourself, nothing ever happens here, or you assess that something should take place, and if it were taking place, then you would have better results. For example, if you hear yourself or others say, we don't have a CRM system and it would be really good if we had one. Well, that's an assessment. It sounds like you want to get something done, but what you're really doing is you're just sharing your opinion about the fact that you don't think that you have one and it would be more effective if you did. Or you might say, like I said earlier, gee, I think it would be great if we had meetings every week. Well, again, that's an opinion. That's just what you think would be effective. We call that an assessment. It's your opinion. Assessments don't cause action. So you can say, we should have a meeting, and yet nothing will happen because you haven't put it into the form or used the tool and language that is the correct tool for action to happen. Let's say you come out of a meeting and you say to yourself, nothing ever happens in that meeting. I bet you've had a few meetings like that. We all have. Well, there's a way that you can be in the meeting to cause action when you see that there's nothing happened or happening if you understood how language works. And that's why we're going to spend this particular episode on action cycle, a conversation for action, and how it works. We're going to take each of those elements and take them one by one and describe what each means and what each job has in the action cycle. And I want you to consider this also, that everything happens in a conversation. So it's in the conversation that I want you to start to be aware of whether there is a request or an offer or a declaration of satisfaction or conditions of satisfaction, those elements. It's not that you study and you have a chart and you're really good at a test when somebody asks you what are the elements. I want you to know the elements so clearly and how each one works, that what happens is when you're in a conversation with someone, they're speaking, you're listening, that you begin to be aware of, is one of those elements missing? And if you're aware it's missing, then you can put it into the conversation and make a more powerful conversation for action or an action cycle. The other thing I want to say, and have you remember a little bit, because I know we've covered some of this before, is that you learn as a human being two different ways. One is through your mind or your understanding. So when somebody teaches you something, you understand it. And there's a good reason that you need to understand things. But you also have a body. You don't just have a mind, you also have a body. You have emotions, you have feelings. And the way your body works or learns is through practice. So, for example, if you wanted to play the piano, you would have to practice. You wouldn't just start playing. And if you wanted to ride a bicycle, you would have to practice. You probably get on your bicycle the first time and fall, skin your knee, and then you get back up and you keep going and practicing. Now, even if your mom or your dad told you all about bicycle riding, or your piano teacher told you all about piano playing, and even if you read a book on bicycle riding or a book on piano playing, you might understand both of those things, but you wouldn't be able to do those things to be an expert, to actually have the skill to ride a bicycle or have the skill to play a piano unless you practiced, because that's how your body learns. So one of the things that we want to do is for you to understand, first of all, how action cycles work and the conversation for action, what it is. And then for you to go out and practice. And how you practice the action cycle is you start listening to the conversation for the elements to see if this element is in the conversation. And then you understand what to do with that particular element. So what we're going to do is I'm going to explain each of those elements right after the break. And we're going to take it step by step by step so that you understand how the action cycle works and what a conversation for action is. And then we're going to also do some practicing. But you'll have to practice yourself. This is just the understanding part. We're not practicing in this episode, but you'll be able to do that on your own. Okay, so come back from the break and we'll go through each of the elements and I'll tell you how it all works. And this is one of those things that once you know how to do it, you can create magic. You can make things happen when they weren't happening before. And you don't have to be the head of the team or the person leading the meeting to be the one that starts the action. So this is Marsha Martin. I'm your host of Talk This Way, and we're being live streamed by Bold Brave TV. And I'll see you right after the break, and we'll go through each of those elements.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them. Rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies. Find settings that allow them to be the most productive and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Hey, welcome back. It's Marcia, and I'm your host of Talk This Way, and we're being live streamed by Bold Brave TV. So let's get right to it. So we have each of these elements that make up an action cycle or a conversation for action. And the action cycle or the conversation for action is more powerful if you make sure you have all of these elements included in the conversation. And you're not going to have a chalkboard or a notebook to write these things down when you're in the conversation. You're just in the conversation. But I want you to start listening and ask yourself what's missing when you're in the conversation of these particular elements. Then you can put it into the conversation and make the conversation for action more effective, more powerful. So first we have what's called a customer and a performer. For action to happen, you need one person in each of those positions. The customer is the person that you're performing for. If you're the performer, think of the customer as your customer and you want to make sure the customer is satisfied. The performer is the person that is doing whatever the customer requests. So you can start an action cycle from both positions. You can start it as a customer and make a request, which is another element. You must have a request or an offer. And if you're the performer, you can start the action cycle by making an offer. An offer, as you can see, is the other side of a request. It's kind of like if you have a quarter and you have heads and tails. Well, heads and tails is either a request or an offer. One is the other side of the other. The customer is the person who makes the request. The performer is the one that delivers on the request or makes an offer to the customer. And it's really important you have both positions, the customer and the performer. A lot of people make requests to groups, and so there's no accountability. You need a specific customer or a specific performer. Don't make a request to a division or to a department or to a board or to a team. Make a request or an offer to a person on the team if you want them to get the team together. Don't just make a request to the whole team. It's more effective and more powerful if you understand action, if you have one customer, one performer to each action cycle. And you have to have both. So a lot of times, and I'll explain how this happens and what it sounds like when you're in the conversation, a lot of times there will be a performer and no customer. And other times there will be a customer but no performer. Because for you to have a customer or a performer in the conversation, both have to make the promise to be that person. In other words, if I'm a performer and I make an offer to someone I want to hold the position of customer in the relationship, in the cycle, in the conversation for action. But just because I make an offer doesn't mean that person has to accept the offer. You need to get a promise. They need to say to you that they are willing to be the customer in the cycle, in the conversation. And likewise, if you're a customer and you're making a request of someone, just because you're the boss doesn't mean they have to do it. People have self-determination. And if you want to be effective in life and actually have action that you want to take place, then you better make the space for the performer to decline. Because if you think you're the boss and so everybody has to do what you request, and a demand is a very, very strong request. Some people think that when they demand it, then it has to happen because they're demanding and they're the boss. But the truth is a demand is just a very strong request. And in order to have a request and an effective action cycle, you have to have a performer. And you don't have a performer just because you say they are the performer. They have to agree. To make it powerful and to have it work, a person has to have the freedom to decline on both sides. So if I'm a performer making an offer, I'm looking for someone that wants me to do the thing I'm offering and that will represent that position as the customer in the action cycle. And it's very important because the customer and the performer each have jobs to do. One of the jobs of the customer is to declare or not satisfaction. One of the jobs of the performer is to declare completion. So if you want to get acknowledged, or if you want someone to know what you're doing, you need to have a customer who takes on that responsibility of being the person that's going to do the acknowledging of declaring satisfaction or not. So now we have the elements. We have a request or an offer, we have a customer and a performer, and we have a promise. If the performer makes an offer and the customer decides to be that position, hold that position in that conversation, and will be the customer for that offer, then the customer makes the promise. Yes, I will be the customer for this. Yes, I accept your offer. Yes, you can do this for me, and I will be the person that will say whether it's done correctly or not. I will be the person that takes on the responsibility to declare satisfaction or not. If you're the customer and you're making a request, even if you're the boss, just because you say you have to do it doesn't mean that they promised. And if you have a bunch of people thinking that they have to accept your request because you're the boss, they will say yes, 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 yes. And eventually things will fall through the cracks. They will get overwhelmed. Things will not get done. Promises will get broken. You have to give the performer the freedom to decline. And then, of course, to renegotiate. Perhaps they are declining the specific request that you're asking, but then they can say, if you will do this and this and this and put some conditions in it, then I will accept. Because a lot of times we have things we've already promised, and if we take on a new promise, just can't take it on just because the boss asked you. You have to look at how much time you have to do things. Actions take time. There's 24 hours in a day. So just because somebody says you have to doesn't mean that there's time to do it. You need to have freedom to decline on both sides. So we have a customer, and if it's the customer starting the action cycle, they make a request. And we have a performer. If it's the performer starting the action cycle, then they make an offer. And whether they're the customer or the performer, they need to get a promise from the other person in the cycle that they agree to be in the cycle with them. Then we have an element that we call conditions of satisfaction. And this is an element that gets left out a lot of times. How many times have you asked somebody to do something and they've come back and they've done it, they said, and then you find out that they did it all wrong? Well, it's probably because you didn't give them clear conditions of satisfaction. For example, if I made a request for you to get me a glass of water, or even get me some water, do I want it with ice? Do I want it in a glass? Do I want it in a pitcher? Do I want it now? Do I want it later? Do I want it room temperature? So many conditions of satisfaction. You can't just say, put that report on my desk. Is the report on your desk at 6 p.m. or 8 p.m.? Next Monday? This Tuesday? Is the report supposed to be certified? Is the report an online report? Is it a verbal report? Is it a written report? All sorts of things need to go into the conditions of satisfaction. And the thing about conditions of satisfaction, and this is something for you to really think about, is both the customer and the performer are 100% responsible for the conditions of satisfaction. In other words, it's not one of their jobs and not the other one's job. It's both of their jobs 100% to make sure that there are clear conditions of satisfaction. And at least there has to be one condition of satisfaction, and that is a buy-win. There always must be by when. And remember, as soon as possible is not on the calendar. Dates and times are on calendars and clocks, but not quickly or as soon as you can or when you can get to it. None of those are specific by whens. I would like you to put this report on my desk by next Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. That's a condition of satisfaction in terms of a by when. Now, when I say you're 100% responsible, what I mean is that you're both need to look to see that the other clearly is involved with creating conditions of satisfaction. Sometimes we think, well, it's the job of the customer. If they're making the request, they should tell me. Well, they probably should, but sometimes we have bad customers. Well, it's the responsibility of the performer to find out what the conditions of satisfaction are. Since they have to perform, then they should ask questions and they should state if this is the way that it is wanted or not. Well, that's true, they should, but sometimes we have bad performers and they don't. So we make it 100% responsible for each party to clarify conditions of satisfaction. That way, neither one can say, well, they didn't give me the conditions of satisfaction. Well, yeah, maybe they didn't, but you're 100% responsible yourself. So why didn't you get them? But just know it's an element in the conversation. So when you're listening to the person making the request or the offer, then you make sure that there's a promise and you make sure that there are conditions of satisfaction. Then the performer does whatever they've been asked to do, hopefully by the time that they have agreed that it will be done. And their job is to declare completion. They don't get to say whether they did it correctly or not. It's not the performer's job to get to say, I did this and I did it really well. You can say, I completed the task, and it's the job of the customer to determine whether it was done correctly, done well, done according to satisfaction. So the performer declares completion, and so there is a declaration of completion as one of the elements in the action cycle. And the customer declares satisfaction. So there is a declaration of satisfaction as one of the elements in the action cycle. Okay, so now we've got all these elements. So what you want to do is you want to start listening. Listen in the conversation what's missing. And a lot of times you can know that there's something missing if you ask yourself the question, is anything happening here? In other words, is anything getting done? But if you've got a kind of a quiet assessment, you're thinking, nothing ever gets done in this meeting. Well, you just told yourself there's no action. So also, now that you know how language works in terms of requests and offers, you just told yourself that there's no requests or offers. And anyone can raise their hand and ask somebody else to make a request or an offer, or make a request or an offer themselves. So you have total power to cause things to happen. It's not just the job of the person that's in charge or whoever has the title. It's not just your manager's job to make sure that action is happening. And it's not just their ability to make it happen. Anybody can cause action to happen if they can make requests and offers. It happens in language. It happens in the conversation. So if you're sitting in a meeting and you're saying to yourself and you're kind of complaining, nothing ever happens in this meeting, well then be responsible and put your hand up and say, I have a request or I have an offer, and find someone in the meeting to make the request of or the offer to. Or ask a question. Perhaps ask the person that's in charge or the manager or the person leading the meeting. Just say, is there a request? Do you have a request? Is that something you're requesting? Because a lot of times people make requests and they think they're making requests and they're really making assessments. When somebody says something like, I really think it would be great if we got together more often, I want you to be able to listen carefully, because that's not a request. That's just somebody's opinion of what they think should happen. And it needs to be put into a form of a request, and somebody needs to know who the request is identified for. Who are you making the request to? Who is going to be the performer? And then you want to listen to see, did that person agree? Or was it just a walk-by request? I know sometimes in my previous years, I wasn't always a great leader, and I make a lot of mistakes now. But I can remember thinking that all I had to do was just tell somebody what to do, and then I assumed it would get done. But I found out very quickly that's not how life works. Just because you assume something or conclude something or think something should happen doesn't necessarily mean it does. You have a lot better chance if you have all the elements of the action cycle in the conversation. So when you listen to people and you can tell they're making a request, but they haven't made it into a request form, they've just kind of told their opinion about what they think should happen, then ask them, is that a request? And when they say yes, say, who are you making the request of? Because you want to get somebody accountable in the action cycle and make sure they're not just asking the whole group. Or if they want to have each person in the group, then say, are you requesting that to each of us? Then it's an action cycle that you have and each other person in the room has also. They're all individual action cycles that they are accountable for. But if you just talk to a group, then somebody else think, oh, somebody else will do it. And there's nobody accountable. So you start listening and then listen to see, is there a condition of satisfaction, at least a by when? Has somebody said that they want it by a specific time? Start listening to see if the element is there. And listen to see, was there a promise? Did that performer that the requester wanted, that the customer wanted to be the performer, that they were giving their request to, did that person that's supposed to do the performing, did they say they would? Did they agree to be the performer? Did they say yes? Did they make a promise? So go through all of those conditions of satisfaction, all the elements, the requests, the offer, and start listening for them in the conversation. And if you find one's missing, then ask a question and put it in. You might say, that's a great request. Is there someone you're making that specifically to? Who do you want to handle that request? Who is the person accountable? Who is the performer? And if they say Jack or John or Eric, whoever they say, Mary, then say, Mary, do you accept? Make sure there's a promise on the table. And are there conditions of satisfaction? And then when the performance is done, then make sure that you're responsible, if you're the performer, to declare completion. Don't just leave it up in the air and hope that they figure it out that you got it done. And besides which, you need to find out if you did it well. It's not your job as the performer to decide or declare satisfaction. It's just your job as the performer to declare completion. Okay, now we've got the elements and how you're listening in a conversation. When we come back from this break, I'm going to take you through the different kinds of examples of conversations that you may run into or you may listen to, so that you can find out and understand what's missing, because that's what we want you to do. Start to listen for what's missing from the elements of the action cycle, because if you can put them in, then you're going to be more powerful and things will get done. And that's what we all want, right? To be effective, have things work. Okay, this is Marsha Martin. I'm your host of Talk This Way, and we'll be back from the break shortly, and we're being live streamed by Bold Brave TV. Looking forward.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like, it was almost instant. Like, I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic on the BBM Global Network, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Hey, welcome back. It's Marsha. I'm your host of Talk This Way, and this is being live streamed by Bold Brave TV. Okay, now I want to get into some of the conversations that you might hear and explain how you can tell which element is missing from the action cycle or the conversation for action. So let's say that somebody comes to you and they start complaining and they say, I work so hard. I come in early every morning. I make coffee. I bring donuts. I distribute it to all of the executives, but nobody appreciates me. It makes me so mad. They don't really care. So that's a conversation you might hear from someone. And when you're listening, what would you think was missing? Well, I'll tell you what's missing. They don't have a customer. So they're performing, and a lot of people do that. They just perform because they think they should, or they want to, or they're of service, which is great. But if you're performing and you don't have somebody in the cycle with you that is taking the position of being the customer, you have no one that is giving you feedback or appreciation or acknowledgement, because that's the job of the customer. So you might say to that person, hey, well, who did you ask to tell you if you were doing a good job or not? Oh, I didn't ask anybody. I just thought it would be nice. Well, then you could say, well, what I would suggest is that you find somebody in the office and you tell them what you're doing and that you would like to have their feedback. So you're not needing to tell them about the action cycle. You don't need to teach them the action cycle. If they want to learn the action cycle, tell them to watch this episode. But it's a way you can rectify the situation and get action happening and cause a person that is feeling down and despair and mistreated and not acknowledged to enjoy their job. Because here's a person that just wants to serve. They just haven't set it up so that they get the feedback. And they're making somebody wrong, and for no reason. It's just that that person doesn't know that they want some feedback. Do you see? Or here's another situation. I just had this in one of my coaching clients. One of the women on the team was saying, we don't have a CRM system. We really need a CRM system. The CRM system that we have now is outdated. The CRM system that we have now puts everything into one place, and we can't find the kind of data that we need to be able to know who to go to get new leads, to get new sales. So if you listen to everything I said right then, it was assessment after assessment after assessment. Her opinion, saying what was wrong in her opinion, and it was a complaint as well. So you know that that complaint is going to fester. So I said, well, let's figure out an offer that you can make that could get this thing moving to a place where you might be able to have CRM system update, new system, as part of the conversation. I said, why don't you go to your boss and why don't you say that you would be willing to do the research? See, that's an offer. I'll research all the systems. And you might even make a request of saying, can you tell me what your conditions are? You know, is price most important? Is effectiveness most important? Is detail most important? So that when I'm researching, I'll do all the work, I'll do all the legwork, I'll get it done, and I'll get it done within 2 weeks. I'll make a presentation, I'll bring it to you, and I'll show you what I've discovered. And perhaps we might find something that could work for the organization to take us to the next level. Rather than just complaining and assessing that you don't have a CRM system that works, why don't you find an offer or a request that you can make? You can make a request for them to assign someone to do the research and that an offer that you would help them. So that's what I'm saying is you can start to notice what's missing if there isn't any action, is a request or an offer is missing, and you can put that in, just like you found in the earlier conversation that what was missing was a customer. Okay, here's another conversation that happens. Put that on my desk. I need it by next Friday. And then the person walks off and leaves the person sitting there. And then later you hear a conversation. My team never is doing the right things. They're not getting things done. I ask them and they just, don't deliver. Well, what's missing? A promise. Didn't get any agreement from that person that they would be the performer in that particular cycle, did they? We just assume, and that's a big word that you want to cross out and never have assumptions. Read The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. Great book. And one of the great things that you need to do is don't make assumptions. Assumptions. And I should, or it should, or they should. It doesn't matter. It's just an assumption. Find out, make your request, get a promise. And it doesn't, and I know it's hard to decline sometimes because, it's like I said, our bodies aren't used to saying no to the boss. It's something we haven't practiced enough. If we're going to get good at it and know how to do it in a way where the boss doesn't get upset, you don't want to just go up to the boss and say, I decline. That's not going to work. But you might say something like, hey, I'm really committed and you can count on me. And I know that you want this done and I want to be part of it getting done for you. However, I have this and this and this that I've also promised you and others to get done by a certain time. And so if I'm going to accept this particular request, I would like to take this one and have more time with it, or be able to turn it over to somebody or delegate it to someone. So I'd like to get your agreement on that. So you renegotiate back and forth. You don't just say yes, because you might not be able to do it if you have all of those other promises to keep. And eventually you're going to have so many promises and so many yeses that something's going to fall through the cracks and you're going to break your promise. And the thing about promises that's so important is that promise is the type of language that builds trust. You trust people who keep their word. If people can count on you to be your word, if your word is who you are, they will trust you more. And all teams, organizations, families, relationships are built on trust. So you want to think about that for the conversations that I'm talking about. Let's see, is another conversation. Oh, they didn't do what I asked them to do. What's missing? Conditions of satisfaction. Maybe they did do what you asked them to do, and they did it according to the conditions that they thought. Maybe they, sent an email and that's what they thought you wanted, when what you wanted was a presentation, a PowerPoint, a whole detail research, everything researched, and you didn't get that. But probably the reason you didn't get that was because you didn't clarify the conditions of satisfaction, and neither did they. So you can start to listen in the conversation when you're hearing people either before, during, or after something is happening of what's missing. Somebody's complaining they're not getting appreciation. Well, probably there's a customer missing. Somebody's complaining that they didn't like the way somebody did it. Well, probably what's missing is conditions of satisfaction. Somebody's complaining that it didn't get done. Well, probably they didn't have a performer and that person didn't agree and then had too many other things to do and no conditions of satisfaction besides. So, start to listen to what's being said. If somebody says, I wish that this would happen, well, that's not a request, it's just a wish. But if they want it to happen, it's going to take action. So you can say, okay, well, what could you offer to someone to help that move? What could you request of someone and who to help that move? Start inserting the thing that's missing in the conversation, because you now know how the action cycle in the conversation for action works. And the other thing I would suggest, especially to leaders who have teams, is make it very clear that people have the opportunity to decline. Now, you got to be careful, because you don't want just people to come up to you and say, I decline, I decline. So they need to know that they need to get their job done and that you're the boss and that you have the right to ask them to do things. But you also need to know that they have the right and the freedom to decline, or else you won't have the results that you want. You'll have breakdowns eventually. So there's something I think would be valuable for all of you, something I just created and that's available. And if you go to my website, marshamartin.com, which is up on the screen, and it's MARCIAMARTIN.com, and you click on the Academy, and you scroll down to the courses that are available in the Academy, there's a course that's now available. And for a short time, it's only $97, and it's a normal $247 course. And I have put together some of the basics that people need to be effective in communication. It's called Talk This Way, Being a Master Communicator. If you go to my website and you look on the Academy and you look for the course, I would suggest that you get the course, especially now because it's such a good price. And what I've done, it was really fun. I've taken my live workshops. So usually you pay $800, $900, or $1,000 to take one of my 3-day workshops. And I've videoed many of them. So I've taken and edited some of the key points in each of the workshops. So it's material from a live workshop. And then my amazing team member who puts together my website made a Marsha Martin animation. And so I also record about each of the live events from the workshops. And there's a Marsha Martin animation that uses my voice. So I think you'll find it fun to watch. And it's about 13 lessons. And they're easy to watch and understand. And I've put graphics there and assignments and all sorts of things to help you. So if you're really looking to be more of a masterful communicator, go to my website and get the Talk This Way Mastery of Communication course. Hey, I want to thank you so much for hanging out with me. In the future, I'm going to, once I get all of this information in each of the episodes and we have all of the stuff that I wanted to have in the series, then I'm going to start putting it all together and tell you stories and bring on guests and kind of show you how to implement everything. But for now, start watching each of the episodes, go back and review them, and I'll see you next Tuesday at 5 o'clock Eastern Time. This is your host, Marsha Martin from Talk This Way, and we're being live streamed by Bold Brave TV. I'm thrilled that you visited and came as a part of the show, and I'll see you next week. Have a fabulous, fabulous Memorial Day.
This has been Talk This Way with Marsha Martin. Tune in each week and discover that the effectiveness of your communication dictates the quality of your relationships, the profits of your business, the results you produce, and your overall success in life. Tuesdays, 5 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Bold Brave TV network.